Welcome to Mastering POI with Nico and your co-host Andrew here. Today we're going to go over another principle. So Andrew, what is the principle we're going over today and what's the definition of this?
The principle that we're going to be covering today is reciprocity. Essentially, with reciprocity, a dumbed down definition would be if I do you a favor, you feel as though you need to do a favor that is either equal or more to that favor.
Okay. Now so how have other people have used this reciprocity, like maybe some case studies, some testimonies?
Sure. So there's a case study that comes to mind is Amway. They're like a cleaning supplies company, I think. And what they did was they would go knock on doors and they would drop off a bug, basically a big box of cleaning supplies. Okay. So they actually triggered two principles here. They triggered consistency and reciprocity. So they basically said, hey, here's a bunch of free stuff, right? Let me know when you're done with it. I'm going to come back in 2 weeks and I'm going to pick up what you don't want. So they're just saying, here's a bunch of free stuff, goodbye. Came back 2 weeks later, and what happened was, on average, people would actually end up purchasing half the bug, half of the cleaning supplies. And if you think about the business model, what did they do with all that, used cleaning supplies? They just went to a different house and they just dropped off that bug.
Okay. And now do you know, who taught you this? It was Chris Carney or that book was it Mastering, what's the other book by Robert?
Influence.
Oh, Influence, okay. So has Mr. Carney ever used this at all? Has he ever had it done to him, like reciprocity?
So he actually uses it a lot it's really easy to use it on him, actually, and he knows when it's being used on him, but it's such a powerful principle that even if you know it's being used on you, you still feel obligated to give back. And a perfect example, it's actually kind of funny, was he's been mentoring you and me for 7 or 8 years now. So we feel as though we owe him a lot, right?
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up hiring Jack Carney, his son, in sales, who had zero sales experience, right? And traditionally in a job, he should have been fired after zero performance after 2-3 months. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
But I felt such an obligation to Mr. Carney and to his son that I was like, I have to keep teaching Jack. I have to keep him around, even though I was in a normal job. He should have been fired.
Oh. Oh, well. And now, do you think you're building more reciprocity teaching Jack Carney with Mr. Carney in another subcategory? It's swinging back.
Oh, but I wouldn't necessarily say so. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say so.
Oh, okay. And then, so how have you used this principle on a personal basis, maybe through business, or a business example too?
So a good way to do it is if in your professional life, whenever you do something extra that is outside of your services or outside of your normal job criteria, don't just say, oh, no problem, it was nothing. Essentially, you're just lying to the prospect or you're lying to your coworker. Let them know that you're going out of your way. Okay, so example would be, let's say you're working late and you're, just doing a bunch of research and you send it to the client. Just like, hey, I just did a bunch of research in your area. These were the ads that we found that would best work. You send the email at 8 p.m. You're obviously in the office late. And then the client says, oh, thanks. And then you reply, oh, no problem. It's part of the service that we offer. Essentially what you're doing is you're just killing all of your hard work. What you could say is, I know you do the same for me, right? And there's just that little tweak of what your reply could be is where the reciprocity is triggered.
Okay.
Because if you say, yeah, no big deal, no worries. He's like, oh, okay, Jack works late. He's doing this all the time. This is just his hours, right? Or, the same thing for Andrew, right? But if you say, no problem, not no problem, but if you say, I know you do the same for me, then that's where the reciprocity is triggered.
No, but wouldn't you think that, say you do the extra step and all that, and you just say, it's no big deal, don't you think that would build more rapport with that? How don't they say, oh, that was great, it's no big deal to him, so I can ask him again for in the future, maybe build a relationship?
No, you're just lying, basically. That's what Mr. Carney taught me. He was like, if you're saying it's no big deal, you're essentially just lying to your prospect. Right, because it's not no big deal, right? I mean, you've got kids, you got friends, you got a life after work. You're sacrificing all those things for that prospect or for that coworker or whatever. So don't lie, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then, Oh, well. So how have you used this principle personally? Maybe for relationships, friendships?
So the principle also works with a little bit with gift giving, right? So I actually started doing this on accident because I was lazy. But I actually, years later, once I learned reciprocity, I realized, oh, this is why these gifts were more impactful. So what do I mean by that? So I was lazy, and you know this. With Christmas or birthdays, I'm always never on time with gifts, right? But kind of like a subcategory of reciprocity is if you give somebody a random gift, right, kind of throughout the year, that gift is more impactful. Okay? So let's say I missed your birthday, January 13th, didn't give you a gift. February 13th, a month later, I give you your gift. That is actually more impactful than if I actually gave it to you on your birthday. And I did this out of laziness, but if you could, and this would be probably complete manipulation, right? If you kind of just did it later on purpose. But that's one way that I kind of like accidentally did it.
Okay. I guess now that you say that, I feel like when people go to Europe and they bring back gifts for me, I always thought it was very special. Like they thought of me in Europe, and those gifts felt more special than I would say like a birthday gift that was kind of mandatory almost, or a Christmas gift. So yeah, because they were like thinking at me in Europe and all that. Like, yeah, I definitely could see how that is. And then, so how can people use this principle? Like, what are some like key takeaways? Like, just a little bit of information you can give someone if they're like, hey, how can I use this in my business? Or hey, how can I use this for personal use?
Sure. So for personal use, you could always do gift giving. That's the easy one. But what you could also do for business is, let's say, obviously, if you're doing extra work, tell them you do the same for me. But another way you could do it, and you can kind of label it with contrast, is let's say I'm cold calling somebody. Okay? And I call them up, they don't really want to schedule, or they don't really want my product. And once they say no, I don't want to do any work with you, Andrew, I don't want to get on a call. Once they say no, there's a little power of like reciprocity triggered. They feel bad. So with that little moment there, it's like a half a split second, that's when you can go for another ask. Right? It's kind of like the reject and retreat. Okay? So there was I forgot which which organization did this. But what they did to get their volunteers up to 50% was they would go to, let's say, they would go to you or, mommy or whoever, right? And they would say, hey, do you want to volunteer for a bunch of kids at a zoo, right? A bunch of juvenile delinquents. Do you want to like chaperone them for 3 hours? 17% of the people said yes. Okay? So how did they use reciprocity? How did they do the reject and retreat? What they did on top of that, in their group number 2, is they would go to you or whoever, and they would say, do you want to be a chaperone for, not a chaperone, do you want to volunteer for 3 years for, it was 2 years, for 2 years for a bunch of juvenile delinquents, just chaperoning them around, whatever. It's going to take like 8 hours a week to do this, right? And some people said yes to that, right? But the majority said no. And then what they would do is they would reject and retreat to the original offer. Okay, if you can't do that, can you, chaperone these same juvenile delinquents for 3 hours at a zoo? 50% then said yes. So it went from 17 to 50% just by adding a little bit of contrast, but reciprocity as well with the power of, the reject and retreat.
Oh, wow. That's like going from 17% all the way to 50% is, like that number is like unbelievable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't seem real.
Oh, wow. But that concludes for our mini podcast for today. If you enjoyed this, please share. It's completely free. If you didn't, just share it anyways.